Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Innovation Storytellers Show. We are going to get a little bit academic today. We're going to dive into research that actually matters to my innovation listeners. And that's why I'm really excited to have with me a very esteemed professor in the topic of innovation, Dr. Gina O'Connor. So let's talk about a little bit about Gina's background. I had the good fortune of meeting Gina at Innovators. If you don't know it, it's an incredible community of corporate innovation leaders from around the world. We met in Arizona at ASU at a big conference that was being held there, where Gina was a phenomenal speaker. And I was so blown away by the research that I really wanted to bring it to all of you. So to give you a little background on Gina, she is a professor of innovation management at Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and leads the strategic innovation practice at Babson's Executive Education Division. She joined Babson after 29 years at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where she served as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, the Director of the MBA MS programs, Director of the Saravino Center for Technology Entrepreneurship, and the Academic Director of the Executive MBA program for RPI's Lally School of Management. Professor O'Connor has been an active member of the Product Development and Management Association for many years and was named a Crawford Fellow in 2018. She is also a member of the Academy of Management. In addition to that, in her spare time, she has also published more than 75 papers and book chapters, including articles in Sloan Management Review, Harvard Business Review, the Journal of Product Innovation Management, the Journal of Business Venturing, Journal of Marketing, Organizational Science, and the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, among many others. And many of her papers have been selected or nominated as the best paper of the year in their respective journals. She has co-authored 3 books on breakthrough innovation. The second of those, Grabbing Lightning, Building a Capability for Breakthrough Innovation, was named one of the top 3 business books of the year by Strategy and Business Magazine. And the third, Beyond the Champion, Institutionalizing Innovation Through People, was nominated for a Best Book of the Year by the Academy of Management. Her research focuses on corporate innovation capabilities with a focus on breakthrough innovation in large, mature firms. Gina's professional objective is to help large established companies learn how to renew themselves through organic growth via game-changing strategic innovation. Professor O'Connor earned her PhD in marketing and corporate strategy from my hometown here at New York University, NYU. Gina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Susan.
I have just been waiting for this chance for a really long time. So I'm so glad we are finally able to connect. So I want to start off with a question. One of my previous guests on the show said that he has never been able to find one corporate innovation team that actually has created innovation within a large Fortune 500 company. That, in fact, all innovation comes from the business unit leaders or from the employees or even from outside, maybe even a merger or acquisition, rather than the team that is designated with creating innovation. Do you believe that to be true?
No.
And does the research bear that out, Gina?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us why that hypothesis, right? And maybe the skeptics sitting there with their arm crossed at the boardroom table going, why is this innovation dude coming up with all these sprints and constantly failing? Why do we have this perception potentially that corporate innovation simply doesn't work?
Well, so far the success rate has not been particularly high. But I think if we're depending on an individual team with an individual project, that's why the success rate is low. So in the world of strategic or breakthrough innovation, evolutionary, anything on the uncertainty spectrum that goes beyond incremental new product development, the management system that it supports any effort inside a company is not built to support the high uncertainty regimes of the more strategic innovation. So if you're one team with one idea and you've got a great champion who's got a sponsor, there's just so many break points there that can cause you to trip up.
Mm,
But if we find companies that, as we find companies that are trying to build a capability for strategic innovation, not focus on one glamour project or a key sponsor that's going to protect these people, you can start to imagine how you would design a management system and an infrastructure that is actually arranged to support an activity that is all about creating the new streams of growth for your company.
mm.
We've seen it happen. Now, IBM did it in the 2000s with their Emerging Business Opportunities program. It was a beautiful thing. The sad part was they did not think of it as a permanent function, and so it was a program. And at some point in time, even though it created $2 billion in incremental revenue, top line revenue, within 6 years for that company,
Wow. Wow. That's a big number.
they moved on. They had kind of a different crisis affect them, and they moved on. And it wasn't set up as a kind of a permanent activity, a permanent sort of function, if you will, with that management system in place. But they proved that it could work. DSM in the Netherlands stands for Dutch State Mines because they started as a mining company. They've gone through many organizational renewals, but they then kind of copied or modeled after IBM's program. They created an innovation center. And when we picked up studying them, they had 5 what they called emerging business areas. Since that time, I'll just cut to the quick, they've sold off all of their business units and replaced them with 2 of those EBAs, so the new streams became the mainstream in that company. And they did it by setting it up as another function in a company.
And it's always like this, it's the business model shift, right? That has the greatest impact on a company, right? And it's probably the most challenging, right? When we think about going from transactionally buying software to now having downloadable SaaS models that each of us are buying on our own. Those are huge shifts in people operations, in technology, in billing and business model operation and hiring and firing, incentive structures. Like, it's massive. And that doesn't happen by building a startup, acquiring it, integrating it, and moving on, right?
No, although that can be part of the equation. It's
True.
just that if you're looking at strategic innovation as a capability with a portfolio of activities designed towards making sure our company has a stake in the ground on a new opportunity landscape, which I call a domain of innovation intent, that is kind of future forward. Exploring with startups or universities or whatever, all of that now comes under a strategic portfolio umbrella of activity for ensuring that in the 5 to 10 year window or the 3 to 5 year window, whatever your like far future is in your industry, that you're there, that
Mm,
you know it, you've built those competencies, you've seen application spaces in which your organization can make a difference. It aligns with your organization's mission. But you're exactly right, Susan. So the current organizational structure, where this fits in, if the business model is not aligned with what the operating units or the business units are used to doing and how they make their money, there's no way it works by kind of starting in a business unit in that setup. For a long time, these initiatives have to be kind of grown in the innovation function
mhm.
until it's safe for an operating unit, whichever one is the closest fit, or starting a new one, or expanding the mission of that business unit. It's got to be safe for them to be able to receive it according to what their metrics are. These things that turn into like political hassles are really mismatches of the management systems required to support each of those sets of activities.
So before we get into the actual structure, because I think a lot of my listeners are wondering, okay, so what's the ideal structure for an innovation vision within a large organization? As if there's a cookie cutter, one size fits
Yeah.
all. But before we dive into that structure, because there are some key elements that every innovation structure should have, according to your research. But can we just take a step back for a moment? What's the culture or mindset component that says if we're really going to decide to be innovators in this company, we have to create a mindset that says, yes, I'm open to X. What are some of those qualities that you've seen among the companies when IBM was doing it right versus when they were doing it wrong? What do you think were some of the cultural elements at play that made it possible?
Well, obviously, this kind of activity is driven by leaders. It's driven by the senior leaders of the company
Mm-mm.
who say that they are caring about not just the future from a dreamy state of the far future of the company, but that they want to be out in front, on top, and ensure their organizations are healthy. So it's like being on the offense as opposed to defending against potential disruptions. That sense of threat is what drives a sense of urgency. But if you build this capability, you actually feel empowered to lead. You see problem areas out there and you say, we can get after those. And those are benefits to society. And anything that's a benefit to society, over time, you can create an economic model that creates enormous consequences positively for the company. So in the case of IBM again, this was Lou Gerstner recognizing that the bioinformatics world was coming to fruition, and he had basically written into the budget, we need to get after this. And then he looked later at the budget review and the money had been taken away. And he was like, I want you guys, he called on his strategy team, I want you to do a root cause analysis because this isn't the only time this has happened. How is it that we see emerging trends, we know we need to get after them, and they die away?
Mm.
And then the cool thing about it was that he didn't say, I want your report on my desk on Monday. He gave them a 3-month window to really dig into the roots of what that culture was. And it's the same thing everybody knows and feel. We've got short term, the urgent outweighs the important, these kinds of things. And so we're trying to make sure everybody's engaged in innovation, that the innovative culture is a really important thing. It is a really important thing, but we don't want everybody doing the creation of the new streams of growth for the company, the higher uncertainty stuff. There's innovative thinking in everybody's job, which everybody needs to feel empowered and responsible for. But then there is the future businesses of the company, and that's a special, not special, it's a, a set of characteristics of skills and talent and processes and all of those sorts of things that, like I said, are comfortable in the world of uncertainty. And so there's a subculture in there that's very different from the culture in the mainstream, which does expect innovative thinking on the part of all of its people, but oftentimes has to be very focused on risk, very focused on safety, very focused on speed, efficiency, delivery to customer. That's a culture that's fairly rigid in many ways. And this other culture is lives in a world of recognizing that none of us know the actual answer. Leaders don't know the actual answer. The teams don't know the actual answer. We are experimenting and kind of creating a future here.
Mm. But there, the side of that, right? The terrifying side is risk, reputational risk,
Mhm.
shareholder risk, really taking big gambles. Like the company that you mentioned in the Netherlands seems like they are fully willing to embrace risk in order to go from what was a mining company to something that is completely on the other side of their core competency. So is there anything from your studies, is there anything that allows for this? I imagine it's a leadership trait, but allows for this level of risk that people can really obtain the right incentive structure and the right comfort level with managing public failure.
Okay, so there's a lot of ways of digging in on that question.
Mm.
So first of all, I think risk is quite different from uncertainty and ambiguity.
Okay.
So, all right. So risk is when you know what the possible outcomes are and you can assign a likelihood of any one of them occurring. And then you can figure out kind of how to hedge your bets based on what those probabilities are. And that's what we deal with every day in business. And so you manage against those probabilities and you kind of hedge your bets. And you'll see that in leadership meetings all the time. What's the likelihood of that happening? And what would be our plan B under that circumstance? And when do we know to change? All those kinds of things. And that's all in play. And people get then afraid of being on the wrong side of whatever that outcome was. But the world of ambiguity is you don't even know what the possible outcomes are. And so you couldn't assign a likelihood to them. That's like the world of what are those opportunity spaces out there?
Right.
That's at the very beginning of this. But the world of uncertainty is we see kind of what the landscape might look like, but we don't know the likelihood of any of them happening. And so that's why this culture requires what we'll call the creation of a function. It's kind of a what we'll call, everybody knows the term ambidexterity. Now you've got to
Sure.
be able to manage the core, the mainstream, and create the new streams at the same time. And the how you do both is you allow a subculture within that news stream, and it has a budget associated with it and a governance system associated with it. So that budget allocation, DSM did not throw a gazillion dollars at three emerging business areas. No way in the world. You manage in the world of uncertainty. Like, first, we're going to sort of explore these areas. And we can see these trends coming forward. And when we think about who we are and what we can bring to the table, and we can spot how you might describe an opportunity space for solving problems. Like in one situation, they were dealing with all the issues of the agricultural methane issues in the agricultural world and how they could deal with that through biosynthesis in many ways. And it's not like that problem's going to go away. It's not
Right.
a fad.
Okay.
A lot of companies are working on it, but it's a big, big problem and it's a complex problem. So you feel grounded that the opportunity is not fleeting and that there's a lot of ways to play. It gives you many options for many product offerings, many categories. It's a portfolio of activity. So having that problem be kind of a big domain of innovation intent hedges risk. The problem's not going away. We're just not certain about how we're going to end up playing in that space. See? And so having those provides comfort. And the extent to which one phrase that has just cropped up lately to me as I keep watching what's happening, leaders have to be able to commit to those domains, and then be agile inside the domains. So the agility inside the domains is how you test, how you experiment, how many opportunities you're exploring at the same time, all of the work that's done subsequent to defining those opportunity spaces.
It's fascinating because I was just, as I was scrolling through LinkedIn this morning, that someone had posted an article that said 57% of all AI projects currently in the hopper will be scrapped by 2027. And I thought to myself, that's probably right on. That for those of us working in innovation, right, the same projects that we started with 3 years ago don't necessarily need to have that level of longevity, because hopefully our findings, our application of those findings and whatever else will culminate into something new and different rather than the path that we were on in 2025. But the response in the comments to everyone was like, see, I knew it was a flash in the pan. I was like, oh my gosh. It was like a reminder to me of me having brilliant marketing insights back in 1998 when a client asked me, do you think we need a website? And I said, I don't know, let's do a deep dive on your competitors and see what they're doing. And none of them had one. And so my response was, I think you can wait. And like, I look back on that and I just want to take a dagger to my own heart.
Oh, Yeah, but
But
see, that's what in the mainstream world, that's exactly what happens is we focus on competitive benchmarking and
mm,
how you're going to grab 2% of market share points away from your competitor. It's the red ocean, right? Competition is all that. In you're thinking if you start thinking about future forward problem areas like what is the world of AI and what can it do? How can it enable, for example, how can it enable human interaction in a brand new way that we've never explored before? Because we have so much social isolation today. That could be an issue that a professional services company might think about with regard to AI. You're
mhm,
right then, Susan. So then it stimulates creative thinking about all the ways that this could occur. And one of the things we do with companies when we try to help them set up this function is come up with their objectives and key results, sort of the metrics, kind of a scorecard. And one of them is what should be your churn rate in discovery and your churn rate in incubation. And then your churn rate should be very low in acceleration. But we build in the expectations around uncertainty. And this is what the venture capital world does, right? It's a portfolio approach. And you're exactly right that what we find is a lot of times we'll come up with a whole cadre of opportunities that as we begin to experiment with each of them, all in service of the domain of innovation intent, we'll find that several of them will combine together, others will fade away. It's all fine. What's most important is how is the strategy of how we're going to play in that space emerging? What is the emergent strategy for our new stream business in this space? And leaders don't need to know about, there's nothing about a go kill decision or a gate review. It's all, how is this strategy emerging? What have we learned? Is it as rich of a space as we thought? Some directions of that space are drying up on the vine, some are too incremental, but others look like, wow, this is a whole area that we could really claim. And that's what starts to happen. And going back to the issue of culture, you can imagine the nature of the conversations that happen now between a governance council, an innovation council, and those teams, those domain teams, as they're learning and they're basically bringing questions to the council. The council's not saying, give us a review and the whole tech review kind of culture. It's what have you guys learned? They have a curiosity and about what the team has learned. And the team is learning a lot of things and maybe starting to formulate a strategy, but it's the leaders who have to really work with them to make choices about which way we want to go from a strategic perspective. So this becomes what Center for Creative Leadership calls collaborative interdependent culture.
mm.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Collaborative interdependent culture. Okay, we may want to circle back to that a little bit later because I think it's fascinating, but I don't want to leave my listeners hanging on without giving a little bit of time to your research. So what struck me when we were in Arizona and I was at your session is that you've highlighted this key areas that every innovation team should consider having as part of the structure, the infrastructure of innovation. And you put them into categories, these three categories: discovery, incubation, and acceleration, that then take you through a process down to conceptualization, experimentation, and commercialization. So I want to just walk through some of these categories. So if we think of them like we're building an innovation house inside of a large corporation,
Mhm.
how do we start? What's the foundation we pour?
Well, from a structure standpoint, before we get to discovery, incubation, acceleration, you need a senior team that who we'll call an innovation council, who serve as the governing team over this, and they've got money. They've got a budget that will be identified to the Newstream group. And then the Newstream group will have kind of a small core leadership team, but as the domains of innovation intent become identified and committed to, which is a whole process, but they do the work to identify potential ones. And then together with the governance group, there's a decision about which ones we're going to go after and a commitment for a 5 year, sometimes a 10-year time frame. Again, it depends on the dynamism in your industry. DSMs were every 5 years before they reviewed them again. So at GE, they would hang on to them for 5 years, but every time one sloughed off, they would just re-up. So they all do it a little bit differently.
Okay.
Okay. So now for each domain, you need a leader and the leader needs a team. And then those get broken down into this concept of the first thing that happens in a domain is kind of mapping out the opportunity landscape. So when a domain of innovation intent is articulated, it talks about the nature of the problem, the opportunity space. It talks about why we should play in it. How does it align with our company's mission and some of our capabilities? And then the third part is what's missing in our current competencies and capabilities that we need to fill in order to bring this thing to fruition for our company.
So are you thinking about like an innovation org chart where we have to think about, okay, these are the hats, right, that people need to be wearing in this organization. Let's see where we can pull internally from the organization, or do we need to hire for these?
Well, so first of all, I was just kind of just describing the template of how you'd write a domain of innovation intent, but then the
Gotcha.
organization chart is around for each. There's discovery, there's incubation, and there's acceleration. And what we find is that there's some people are better at one of those than the other, and some people, most people don't want to participate in this at all.
Mm.
Because the world of discovery is all about that role of ambiguity, where I don't even know what the possibilities are. That's the job of discovery. And then the world of incubation, as you described, is how do I experiment to bring these opportunities to life to see how they're emerging? And we're experimenting on a lot of different fronts at the same time. And then the world of acceleration is scaling, and that is just total chaos. You got problem solving, you got the market calling you with 49 applications that you hadn't thought of, and all kinds of the manufacturing line, the plastics not coming off right. There's just so many stories that happen, but people are familiar with growing a business and scaling it quickly. I think in the world of business, we're more familiar with that activity than with the first two. Okay. So you asked about internal hires versus outside. One of the most surprising things that we found in our research is that the single biggest correlate in terms of management practices with breakthrough innovation outcomes is the strength of internal informal networks. So people know who to call to get stuff, to learn information. How does this happen in our company? Those sorts of things. It's very, very interesting because our whole focus lately has been on, Henry Chesbrough and open innovation, the whole thing about external. So this really surprised us. So it really impacted our thoughts about how you would staff these things. And it turns out that if we start to make the organization aware that this is a new function in our company and this is its mission, there will be people, I guarantee you, coming out of the woodwork saying, I want to do that.
Wow.
I want to do that. Because many people, most of our world is the world of operational excellence and customer intimacy. And if you are a person who likes ambiguity or likes the world of uncertainty, you're kind of stuck, and people who are in that world of operational excellence, but prefer this, they're a little bit, sometimes I talk to people a lot about it's kind of depressed, like the job isn't as energizing. And if you
Mhm.
put a person who really thrives in the world of the mainstream, in the world of the news stream, it's complete anxiety for them. It's just, I don't know which way to go. So there really are matches of people. So between mainstream and newsstream, and then within newsstream, discovery people, incubation people, and acceleration people have different characteristics, actually. So For those who are very concerned, like, oh my God, I need to create all these new roles, to start, you don't need it at the very beginning as you're just starting. We find more similarities between discovery and incubation people than between those two and acceleration. So we've
Yeah.
created this new word, it's not in the dictionary yet, called dincubation before.
What is
It's
dincubation?
discovery and incubation in one word.
There you go.
But
You
yeah.
I was having a conversation with some folks who are coaches. They were also talking about within the creative process, there's the need for the critic, like the person who I think of these as the attorneys, the insurance folks, those people who do the risk analysis to determine whether or not great idea, you might lose a couple of fingers or people in the process. So we might want to think twice about how we do this, right?
Mm.
Or people who are in compliance and regulatory issues and things like that. They also have a role in the innovation process, but it's timing, isn't it, for those folks of like where we bring them in, because we don't want to stifle the innovation process before it
Mm.
begins.
Well, all of that starts and is heavily in a big part of the incubation aspect. So in incubation, we're testing technical uncertainty and market uncertainty, which for us, since a clear customer segment doesn't exist usually at this point, it's it's all of the market infrastructure, and that will include the regulatory environment.
Mm.
Okay, so it's a very broad market. So technical market uncertainty, resource uncertainty, they're also checking on, and that's not just about money and people, it's about the competencies to accomplish what we need. And so in incubation, you find a lot of activity around partnerships, learning-based partnerships. And then the final one, which is the killer for most of the projects, is organizational uncertainty. And
Mm.
that's all about what feels like the politics of things. Oh, that business unit said they'd commit, and now they're withdrawing commitment, or so and so moved on, and I've lost my sponsorship support. There's passive resistance, but there's also just where is this business going to fit in our organization? We can't use the sales force of that business unit. They're paid on commission to sell to current customers. All these different kind of misfits. And in incubation, we have to test those just as much as we have to test the other three. And so most of our processes that large corporations have adopted from the startup world, the business model canvas and lean startup and all of those things, they ask a lot of they probe on the first three uncertainties, but none of them touches the organizational uncertainty side. But in a learning plan environment, that's a method that we've developed that's front and center. So,
Do you think one of the things that struck me in your presentation is just how desperate we are for moonshots, and that too many corporate innovators are aiming too low, right? We're getting too many small ideas with a really high failure rate. There are lots of interesting ideas that are hard to actually implement, or our resources are spread too thin to actually manage them. And lots of irrelevant ideas get churned up. And then we have to tell employees, thanks, but no thanks, right? They're not aligned with the company's ambitions. And then you have the potential for killing morale in the process, right? So, how do we actually get the thinking once we put these three pillars in place? How do we keep our eyes on the prize of really being focused on the moonshot rather than endless incremental innovation?
I mean, that is exactly the reason that most companies moved from innovation contests and hackathons in our observation to
Mhm.
these domains of innovation intent. So
Mhm.
the way they are described. And so interestingly, a team that is trying to actualize or bring to life a domain of innovation intent, how should their progress be measured? I mean, is it a gate review? I mean, really. And so there are processes around milestone activities, but they're developed differently than a stage gate, pre-designed set of gates. But the metrics are really in service of the domain of innovation intent. It's not in service of a business unit's current needs. It's not in service of the financial metrics at the beginning. It's all how have we actualized this domain? And in some cases, probably 40% of the cases, what we find that when we really dig in is that that domain, as I mentioned earlier, is too small and too incremental. And
Mhm.
so what we find is when we start working with companies and we work with the leadership team of the strategic innovation function, not the council. We work with that leadership
The
team of the
implementing team.
function. They're
Mhm.
the ones and their team members who do this work to kind of find and surface and articulate these domains. And then the Innovation Council walks through it with them and they end up committing to a number of them. Then that's where those meetings take place about what have you learned and how have you actualized it. And I have seen innovation councils get so excited by these possibilities. And what we try to do is help that council remember this is a portfolio. It's not a pipeline where you're going to pick the best project and run with it.
Mhm.
No, no, it happens differently within discovery and incubation because you don't know. You don't know how until you start to actually bring this to life in the marketplace, how it's going to play out.
And
And
we
so,
have to be comfortable with this place of not knowing, right? We're
yeah,
placing many bets to see what will work
there
within this intent.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's not like one of the bets is going to win and the rest will go away. Like I said before, they just tend to merge. This is why it's so cool for large companies to do this in comparison to the startup world where you have venture capitalists. Venture capitalists will have a portfolio of bets, but they're all independent of each other from different startups, et cetera. And so there's not an overarching strategy to a portfolio other than a financial strategy of your exit, right? Here, it's a strategy of how you're going to impact society. What new offerings are you going to be, what new problems are you going to be able to solve that will bring beautiful financial consequences back to the company? And so the now that portfolio is all interdependent. Each experiment, each opportunity. It's not like we're looking for the single best one. We're looking for how we can build this as a business. I talked about DSM. I was able, when their website, earlier versions of their website, to kind of get a sense of what happened with each of those EBAs. And they generated, geez, so many platforms of business in different categories. The richness of how that came to life was a beautiful thing. Same with most of IBM's EBOs, so emerging business opportunities.
Yeah,
So you're right, it's a very different way of thinking, and it's different from the mainstream of the company, and it's different from the venture capitalist.
right.
Yeah.
So I just want to I'm going to steal from your presentation that you gave at Innovators and ask these three questions. What is the world of the possible? What are the big, complex, wicked problems, is so Bostonian, wicked problems facing the global economy today? What are the industry, technology, business model, value chain, societal market trends that, taken together, reinforce this vision? Which of these areas might we contribute to providing value? And how do we want to be defined as a company 10 years from now? That is just the questioning we do, an inward looking question when we do what is the world of the possible, right? That's step one.
Yes.
Then your next set of questions for the domain of innovation intent is, and developing that, why us? What internal competencies do we believe we will still be valuable and necessary for us to leverage? What are the technology trends and disruptions in the areas? And which internal competencies appear to be disrupted in our current markets, but maybe game changers in others? And which of our current markets customers are struggling with disruption, but could benefit from novel technical approaches that we could provide? So I think that why us is, why are we the ones to be doing that? And that's a big soul searching moment for a company. And then that last question you mentioned, the competency gaps. What new capabilities do we need? In which research domains and business model areas do we need to build or evolve capabilities? And which do we access externally? What is the partnership strategy that you mentioned before going forward? So like, I feel like these if we can just get ourselves, and I think it's actually an annual moment of reflection, even as we peer down at the portfolio that we've created, are we still on track with this domain of innovation intent? Like,
Exactly.
I think it's like such a great, almost like meditation exercise for corporations to look inward at their innovation process and saying, are we still on board with this intent?
That's right. And the Innovation Council has to be comfortable with the fact that what you originally thought the big opportunity problem area was, as we're making our way into how we might play in that space, even that will change, but it changes based on the evidence and the experience. So yeah, thank you for reading those questions. And I think one thing too, you asked, how do you make sure you don't incrementalize these opportunities? Because we call it incrementalization creep. It can happen because these teams start to get
So
on.
seductive, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's like, oh, let's just build a little bit of revenue. Let's just see where we can like make a
it's
couple inroads and a
and
product
the more
extension.
pressure they get to like move one over to the business unit. That's why the scorecard is super important,
Mm.
and you're in service of the domain, not of quick transition. So at any rate,
Wait, can I just say that one more time? You are in service to the innovation domain. You are not in service to the business units you currently have,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
Your focus is the health of the company, not the health of any single business unit.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that has implications for who sits on the Innovation Council and all kinds of implications about where this, back to structure, where should this group report, and all of that sort of thing. But it starts to make sense the more you think about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was like, oh, I wish more people were hearing this. So then you get into the work of discovery and you begin to use really smart discovery tools, right? So can we just get a little practical for a moment and say, okay, if I'm thinking about getting started in this, or if I have an innovation program, but it's really not reaching its moonshot objectives, how do I get started on better discovery tools? What should I be doing instead of a hackathon?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say that, well, I'll talk about some of the tools that we've observed that help get people kind of out of their current way of generating ideas. There are people that host idea jams and those kinds of things within. If the write-up of the domain of innovation intent is well done, it stimulates creative thinking. And so then idea jams and contests and those kinds of things in the guide, within the guidelines of a particular domain, now you start to get ideas that may be more relevant. And so this is one way of involving everybody in the company who is interested in that. And but then the team carries it forward. So that is definitely one way to do it. But there's other mechanisms. I had one company, he had his discovery team. He says, I want you to go to at least 3 conferences a year. And I don't want you to ever attend the same conference twice within a period of 5 years.
Hmm.
So expose yourself to many, many different perspectives and different points of view. Engagement with the startup community is always the case, but there's also some kind of brain exercises that we can go through. I don't know how detailed you want to get, but if you're starting off with a problem area, which is how most of the domains are written up, you think about what are the use cases? And for each use case, what might be various market segments? And for each market segment, what kinds of technological opportunities are required? So there's this model that it actually came out of from some colleagues at NC State University called the TAPM model: technology, application, product, market.
Hmm.
And any any combination of those will stimulate your thinking about potential use cases or technologies. So, but those are all just kind of sitting around in the brain work. Most discovery teams are in the field talking to organizations, going to different conferences and trade shows and learning, engaging with universities and understanding what some of the relevant technologies opportunities are for this domain of innovation intent. There are also, at Corning, for example, with Gorilla Glass, most people know that story about the visit and the talk between the two CEOs about the issue of the screen on the phones breaking. And that enabled the commercialization of Gorilla Glass, which was Corning's innovation. And Corning had these discovery teams that had quotas of writing it within a domain area. The team was two people, kind of a strategic marketing person and then a technical R&D person, pairing up, and either through desk research and visits to potential companies and conferences, they had a quota to write one white paper a month. And it had a particular template that we have now called, it wasn't Corning, but them and a lot of other companies, a business concept. What could this be? And in Sealed Air, they did sprints. So their whole team took about, was it 6 months on a particular domain? And they would divide up into smaller groups and kind of do the same thing, come up with business concepts. And so there are ways of bringing some professionalism or some accountability.
And historical record, right? We might not want to do it now, but we might do it a year from now, right? It might not be the timing issue, might be
exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of stories about the way that this takes place. But you can imagine the kind of people that you want in the world of discovery. They are just consumers of information, so curious about everything. They want that. There are many discovery teams in Boston, where Babson is, hanging around MIT and the Cambridge area, and lots of groups of like corporate venture capital types and all those. And they just like hover bees around the hive around a novel technology and are talking to startups a lot to learn what the opportunity spaces are. So that's one element in learning about the scientific work and then figuring out how to connect it to something that is relevant in that domain of innovation intent and articulating that as an opportunity, which we'll call this business concept kind of a template that we've got. And we recognize that coming out of discovery, those concepts, the only thing you really have to know about it is that if you're dealing with a technical issue, it's not like breaking the laws of physics. It's not impossible. It may not have been done yet, accomplished yet, but there's a possibility of it. So yeah, we call it, as you mentioned, the world of the possible.
The world of the possible. So we're hitting our time, but I think we probably need to do a round 2 on actually getting to execution and implementation, because I think there's so much meat here. It's why I wanted you to come on the show so badly, because there's so much that we need to explore in really doing corporate innovation right. And just knowing that the average chief innovation officer lasts in their role about 22 months, right? I mean, it's a place of great interest, a lot of hope, but a lot of churn when we don't nail down exactly what the path forward is. And I just want to give all of our innovation folks out there different roadmaps that they can use to be successful in the way that they're doing it. And when it's grounded in academic research, such as yours, Dr. O'Connor, I really want to make sure that people have it in their hands. So please tell me you'll come back and we'll be able to do like the nitty gritty, the get in there and this is how you do it kind of discussion too.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I want companies to be able to build this capability, which so many times, as you say, we start with a bang. The expectations are out of alignment with reality. We crawl our way individually to learn through experience. By then, it's 4 years down the path and we shut it off. And all of that learning has been lost. And one of the things that I've said, and I said it at Innovators, is we know a lot more about how this works than we're using. And I think it's the next level of sophisticated practice in management. So Sales has turned into a full marketing function. Purchasing has turned into supply chain management. Everything has become more sophisticated. And I think the time is now for new product development to become innovation along that continuum with the recognition of strategic innovation fully in place.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave it right there because that's perfection. So thank you. Gina O'Connor, if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
I would say on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So please do. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly can find your books and find your work at Babson and in throughout the innovation community. If you don't know Dr. Gina O'Connor and her research, the time is now. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Here's to a round two when we when we can schedule that too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.